Hello and welcome to another basketball podcast. I'm your host, Justin Coben, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Marco Amendola and third-time podcast guest Matt Lafferty. Last episode, we picked our over-unders for the teams in the Eastern Conference. Today, we'll be tackling the Western Conference. For those listening on Spotify, we recommend moving over to YouTube or just watching this one on Spotify rather than listening. We have these signs, as you can see, that will be showing to the viewers for every team when we make our picks. Lastly, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. Give us 5 stars if you are on Spotify. And with all that being said, our guest today, Laff, how are you doing? How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Excited to talk about the loaded Western Conference and try to figure out who's going over, who's going under. I think it's going to be tough to pick some unders on this one. There's just too many talented teams here, so it'll be interesting.
So many good teams. I mean, the Spurs are like the third lowest at 36.5, like insane. And then my co-host, Marco, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the West. Last year, there were 5 teams with over 50 wins. Mm-hmm. We had, 10 teams with over 46 wins. So you could see a lot of movement in the standings. I think it's maybe more interesting than the East. So looking forward to it.
Did either of you guys end up having more than half the teams over, more than half the teams under? Like, where'd you guys fall on that, Laff? I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was going through it, but I think I'm pretty even. I definitely have more unders, I would say, in the East, just given, like we talked about last time, like the bottom of the Eastern Conference, there's a lot of those tanky teams. I just don't think that's going to happen as much in the West, but obviously, the West has got to play the West so more so than the East, so it's going to be winners, going to be losers. So it's a weird one. But yeah, I probably had maybe a little bit more lean to the over overall, but I tried to keep it relatively 50-50.
Mine, I don't know if it's the right way to do it, but I ended up being 8-8 over and under in each conference, just the way I ended up doing it. But could be wrong. There could be 10-6 in one conference and, the opposite in the other. Marco, what about you?
Yeah, mine are pretty even. In the East, I had 8 over, 7 under. And then in the West, we'll make it a surprise, but it's pretty much 50-50. I don't want to spoil anything.
Did I say the wrong? Yeah, wait, how did I end up with even? It must be 8-7 in both.
NBA.
Yeah. It must be 8-7 in both. I tried to get it as close to even as I could.
You were including the Supersonics in the Vegas team of the future. You were like that.
Exactly. Okay, well, if you guys are ready to go, we can start off with the highest over-under total for the Western Conference, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Where did you guys fall on the Thunder? Oh, we all have our signs. Okay. Oh, Marco. Last time we said whoever's on the island, they get to speak first. So, Marco, why did you go under on the Thunder?
So the line is 56.5. They were at 57 last year. So they're right. The line's right where they were. And the narrative has been they added Caruso and Hartenstein, which in theory were 2 pieces that they were desperately missing. And it seems like they filled a lot of holes, but I don't know. I think in the past we've seen young teams maybe break out and have a strong regular season, and then their wins take a couple steps back the year after. Like, it's hard for a young team to maintain that level of being just that much better than everyone else. I think we know the West is going to be a bloodbath. Like, the top 3 seeds last year were all in the same division, the Northwest. So, yeah, it's a tough schedule, like we know, and they could still have 54, 53 wins and be the 1 seed. Like, I think the West is that deep where we could see a lower win 1 seed. And yeah, I think it's one thing to make moves that make sense, but it's another thing. Maybe it takes a while for them to gel. Like we talked about how Caruso is a favorite to win 6 Man of the Year. Like, we don't know what their lineup's going to be. maybe Shea gets hurt. Things can happen. I think the line's high.
And that's fair. And Laugh, why did you go on the opposite side of that, on the over of the Thunder?
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one. I think there's just too much to like with OKC and their young talent and how successful they already are. And the other piece we haven't talked about is they have about 1 million assets that they can use to even beef up their team even more. So there's possibility they go in after. I thought Laurie would have been a really interesting fit, but I hadn't heard that trade rumor conversation. I don't know if they could make the salaries work, but he seems like someone where they could add an additional shooter, another big to pair along with Chet. But getting Hartenstein and getting Caruso is clearly filling some holes. And I think the biggest one they had was just not having a defensive big that could rebound the same way. Like Chet, I think he can develop into that more so, but he's still relatively raw, relatively undersized. He's strong, but he's just not the same as someone he's just not as big, as Hartenstein. So I think that provides something, especially against the guys like, the Nuggets, against the Mavericks. They have two big lineup. They have Timberwolves with Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert. So getting another big in there is just huge for them for a matchup perspective. So yeah, it's too much to like. I think with OKC, I think they finish as the 1 seed. I think they're young enough too, where they're not like a LeBron James Cavaliers team where they don't really care what they see. Like I think they still go for it in the regular season at this point. So yeah, I'm going with the over here.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think they're kind of a matchup nightmare defensively for any team. Like Hartenstein is a perfect big style of big for those hefty Andre Drummond, Jokic, these big bodies that'll get thrown at him. I know Chet's a little more frail, so maybe those guys could kind of beat up on him. So it's nice to have that backup option, give a different look. They had 57 wins last year. They were, top of the Western Conference. They only got better. They added Caruso, who's shot over 40% from three last season. Added Hartenstein, get that big depth up. Their team's just super deep, super young. Everyone's improving, and like you mentioned, Laugh, they have that asset haul of picks at their disposal, and they can make any move they want. They can move Topic if they want in a trade. I'm sure some team would be chomping at the bit to get him if they want to upgrade somewhere. They have Ousmane Dieng too, who's another upside young flyer that a team might want. So I really like their top 7, top 8, with Shea, Caruso, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, Dort, Cason Wallace, Hartenstein, etc. Isaiah Joe. They're super deep, and they have a lot of assets at their disposal to get even better. So I really like what they have. And then next up, we got the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the second highest over-under total here at 52.5. Where did you guys fall on the Timberwolves?
I knew I was going to be
Laugh
here.
Laugh on the island. Why did you go over on the Timberwolves?
So last year, as I was watching the Timberwolves play, that game against the Celtics where they gave Tatum nightmares after Jaden McDaniels locked him up. I saw the way he guarded Kevin Durant. That team is just they had a different mentality last year. I think they brought a defensive intensity that we haven't seen really, since the mid 2000s, arguably. They were so good defensively. And that just creates so much problems for teams that are trying to get in the flow of their regular season game, gain chemistry. They're just a nightmare matchup for anyone. So that being said, they have a relatively the same team. I do like the add of Dillingham on their offense. I think that's a really interesting fit for them because I do think they need something to take pressure off Anthony Edwards. He was relied on a little bit too heavily, and we clearly saw that in the playoffs. But I do think that in the regular season that they can relieve some pressure off him. It doesn't have to be him all game. It can be him at the end of games, but in the playoff atmosphere, it was really just Edwards ISO ball, come and set a high pick and roll for him. That was pretty much it. So I'm not super high on their offense. This is really more of a dominant defensive play, a dominant defensive team that I think those types of teams, I think the Knicks have a chance to be like this year. Is just those type of teams can do really well in the regular season, just in terms of limiting opponent scoring. So yeah, I'm going with the over here.
Gotcha. And then Marco, on the flip side, why were you on the under for the Timberwolves?
Part of it's just the depth of the West again. Like if we have all these teams that are going to be above 500, having 50 wins could put you at 2 seed, 3 seed, 1 seed. Like I don't know if they're that much ahead of the crowd behind them now. Conley's a year older. I don't know if we've seen enough of the depth pieces. Like I think outside of their starters, I think Slow-Mo is a sneaky big departure. I think he's one of those guys that just fit in the system, did a little bit of everything. Like, we're going to see a lot of Alexander Walker. I mean, I don't know. And I think, yeah, I do like their swag. I feel like they have sort of that intensity that some of the teams lack. And I would say if I'm saying like OKC is going to be under, I think I like them less than OKC. So I know their line, they're projected for less wins, but I think, yeah, I'll stay consistent and say, I think under is just how I feel.
I agree with you there. 56 wins last year. It's hard to look at that number and then say 52.5 is fair. But I do think they got a little bit worse. Mike Conley's just another year older. Like you said, they lost Slow-Mo, Monte Morris. Those are two rotation pieces if guys get hurt that they might need to lean on. Their only true backup big at this point is Naz Reid. And then, they don't really have a backup 4 or 5 otherwise. It's kind of, it's those two, Gobert, Towns, Reed, and then like Jaden are like their 4 bigs, and they play 2 at once for the most part. But I don't think they have another like security blanket because Towns is notoriously injured. Last season he played 62 games, the year before 29. Then he had a healthy season the year before that, 74. But the 2 years before that was at 50 and 35. So I worry about the health of this team. Anthony Edwards just had a long season, really healthy season, long playoff run as well, and now is playing for the Olympics. I don't know. I see them as a team that had a fire in their eyes last year, kind of going for it. They saw that Nuggets dream matchup, and they really lit the world on fire. They destroyed like the Suns in the opening round, which made people really open their eyes that they're a true contender. But I feel like they're going to come out the gates a little bit slower with it not meeting as much. I felt like they had that like passion, that drive in them last season. I just feel like they're going to start a little slower. That's just my gut read, but I think it'll be close to the 52.5.
So with Anthony Edwards, we haven't really talked about him as much as a superstar, right? Like, I think this was his breakout year. Like the first couple of rounds of those playoffs, he made a name for himself. And I mean, there was talks about him being the face of the league, after those couple of rounds. And then as soon as they lost to the Mavericks, that conversation went away. So I think that's just how NBA Twitter goes, but I'm curious what you guys think. Like, he's 22 right now? Like, he's still got another level, I feel like, to go to, which is crazy to say because of how talented he is. But do you guys think he has room to keep growing as a player? Do you think he takes that step and keeps improving?
I think the unique thing about him is that he's like a two-way star. A lot of those stars, like those guard stars that end up like emerging, like Luka, for example, is kind of a one-way star. The unique thing about Ant is he's hungry and he wants to take on those like elite guard matchup, which is super impressive. I feel like he needs to get more consistent from 3. He's, shown 35.7% from 3 last season, 36.9% the year before, 35.7. He's not like an elite 3-point shooter yet, so that's got to become more of an like part of his arsenal. I believe in him as a talent. I think he will end up being one of like the top players in the league one day. I don't think he's there yet. If I put him, like, if you compare him and Donovan Mitchell's numbers, they're like the same. It's like so crazy how identical their stat lines are. So he's at the Donovan Mitchell level for me at the moment, which is, like top 5 shooting guard in the NBA. But he definitely has the potential to move into, the best shooting guard in the game, arguably. Yeah. Marco?
I'm curious what you think there, Marco. Like, I think the Donovan Mitchell comp is really interesting. And he looked phenomenal in the playoffs, like unstoppable, really. Mm-hmm. But to your point, like, I don't think Donovan Mitchell is as much of a two-way guard, as Edwards. So there's that side of it. But if I was picking someone right now, I'd take Edwards 10 times out of 10. So I don't know if I would agree that they're the same level, but Mitchell's really good. No, you're not wrong. So But
He's
yeah,
pretty good
curious.
defensively too. He's very long,
Yeah.
like for his size, Mitchell. I think
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards has a couple inches on him, if I have that correct. Yeah, just he's an inch
Probably
taller.
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think part of his allure is just his charisma and the fact that he's so fun that kind of elevates him to a different status than he's probably playing at right now. And like in terms of team chemistry, like the Timberwolves were kind of just a mess the year before last year. And I feel like Towns has historically been kind of like a soft, complainy player. Gobert has been kind of soft and like unliked. And Edwards just comes in and kind of made the Timberwolves likable and like got them somehow to like be this cool, swelling team. So I feel like that part of, yeah, I like the Mitchell comp too. Like I think, yeah, there are kind of shooting, I don't want to say problems, but he has room for improvement. And I think, I don't know if I'm as high on his ceiling as like some people. Like I think part of it is just the fact that he's way more entertaining to watch just because of what he's doing. Like, basketball related, and that's fair. I think that's part of it's it's entertainment, and but yeah, I think I believe I almost believe in him just because of his charisma. That makes sense. Like,
Yep.
Just pops up.
And one more comment on the Mitchell Edwards comparison. Their defensive rating, Donovan Mitchell is literally 0.1 worse defensive rating than Anthony Edwards. It's like they're neck and neck. And then in terms of defensive win shares, Donovan Mitchell is third in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is fourth in the NBA, which is pretty insane in my opinion. They're both neck and neck. Mitchell's sneaky, a very solid defender on a very good team. That's just my take.
I stand corrected.
Had to pull it up. I was like, I feel like he's a good defender. But yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if Wemby becomes like a superstar in the next year or two, like how Ant will be treated by the media, because I feel like he's kind of filling that gap right now where it's like Steph, LeBron, Durant are getting older, and like Luka for some reason not crazy popular. Like Jokic is kind of just doing his own thing. Like I wonder if there'll be a sneaky Ant Wembanyama rivalry for like media darling.
It's that level of flash with Anthony Edwards too. Like he's so like swaggy and like just throws down like these crazy dunks, and he just has that level of like buzz around him. And I thought the hype just went a little too far in the playoffs. Like I love him as a player. I thought it was a little overblown personally.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then next up we have the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves playoff rival from last year. Their win total is at 51.5. Where'd you guys land on the Nuggets? Oh, wow. I did not expect that. I did not expect that. I thought we were all going to go over here. Okay. It's hard for me to not bet on Nikola Jokic. The Nuggets have been consistently for the last few years now, like the juggernaut in the Western Conference. And I just believe in the talent there. I know they lost KCP. I think that's huge. I think it's weird that you guys both went under on them when they lost KCP, and you also went under on the Magic who got KCP. So I'll have to hear from you more a little bit on that one, because if you think they got a lot worse, then you must think the Magic got a lot better. But I mean, yeah, like you guys said before, I get that the Western Conference is very deep. It's very stacked. But what does Nikola Jokic do? He always wins. And I believe in Christian Brown taking another step. I believe, like Marco said in the Hot Takes pod, I believe in Peyton Watson quite a bit. I think the Russell Westbrook get for them was like pretty huge off the bench. Like I think he'll provide a nice spark there, a different look to like the style of shooters they have currently, kind of someone who can like move off ball with Jokic kind of like on drives and stuff. He does play with Jokic, and then a lot of energy in the Jokic-less minutes. I like the add of Saric a lot too, as like another 3-point shooting big potentially there. Like he just makes so much more sense than like a DeAndre Jordan. I know they tried to make Zeke Naji into that 3-point shooting big, but that never ended up panning out. It's just hard for me to bet against them at such a, I think, favorable number at 51.5. It feels a little low for how talented they've been over the last few years and having the best player in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all fair. I just want to comment on the KCP thing quick, because I think he is literally the perfect fit for that Nuggets roster. And not that he wouldn't be a good fit on any roster. Like, who wouldn't want a 3-and-D guy, But I think pairing him with Jokic and they also aren't the best defensive team. So that's part of my concern with them losing KCP and losing that defensive guard. And to be honest, I don't know how good of a defender Christian Brown really is. So I'm interested to see how that pans out this year. But with the Magic, they're adding another defensive identity. Like he's a good fit for them, certainly. But I just don't think he's like a game changer for them. Where I really do think he can be that on the Nuggets lineup. So just wanted to comment on that quick. But
yeah, of course.
With the Nuggets under though, so I bet the Nuggets under last year at 52.5. Having heartbroken. They had the 56 win season. Honestly, this year, I think it makes sense. I think the line makes sense. I think they've lost those depth pieces like you talked about. And I don't know if I believe in Russ on that roster as much as you were saying. I do like him as energy off the bench in Jokic minutes. I think that part makes sense. I don't really see him as a great fit around Jokic spacing-wise, just given his shooting woes. So I'm interested to see how teams would, because if you're giving Jokic less space on the floor by just packing the paint, like with whoever is guarding Westbrook, I don't really love that fit. So, but I do think he makes more sense as like an off-the-bench non-Jokic minutes guy. So, yeah, that's really it. And I just think they have been, Jamal Murray's been relatively injury-prone. Jokic has been incredibly healthy through his career. So, I wouldn't bet on him getting injured just with his play style and everything, but I'm the biggest Jokic guy there is, so it's hard to bet against him. I'll probably be eating my words here, but I just think losing the depth pieces makes me a little bit scared off of them on this 51.5 number.
Marco?
I believe in Jokic too. That's kind of like my only pro to hop on this over. Like, I don't know. I was kind of disappointed in their playoff series against the Timberwolves last year. Like, I thought they looked really not composed and just off that one game in particular when they got rolled. But they had a couple bad losses. And I don't know. To me, they didn't look like a championship team, considering they just won a championship and had this, like, relatively easy run after multiple, like, tough playoff losses. So it was weird vibes for me last year, and very un-Jokic-like, and I don't know if it was just like a Jamal Murray thing, Michael Porter Jr. thing, but I don't know. I don't trust their depth. I mean, 2 years ago, when they were the 1 seed, they had 53 wins, they won the championship. So, like, 51.5 is not that far from, like, I mean, they could still be like the 2 seed, and so it's not like they're that bad. It's not like they're going to miss the playoffs or anything. I just don't know that they're still, like, I think Jokic is good enough to make them a top 4 or 5 seed and, like, be good, be a tough out in the playoffs, but I just don't know if they're that dominant presence. And yeah, I don't know. There's something off going on with Jamal Murray right now, and I don't know if I trust him to play a full season and stay healthy and just not be kind of hot and cold. And they're already relying on guys like Watson and Strother. Like, they're going to need Murray to be a star, and I'm kind of lower on them than I was a year ago.
Just one comment on what you mentioned about the Timberwolves series and them just not looking like themselves. I feel like that was a product of them playing and drawing the Timberwolves personally, because they're so big heavy, the Timberwolves, with Gobert as like that presence down low, and Cat is another large guy there, and so much of what the Nuggets do is operate using Jokic and having these rim runners and Aaron Gordon, and they like to have Christian Brown as a rim runner. I think Russell Westbrook will operate that way next to Jokic. So, I feel like it was kind of a weird series. They just drew a tough matchup. I feel like they were the team, if they had drawn OKC or if they had drawn Dallas earlier, that they would have been playing the Celtics in the finals. That's just how I felt about them all season. I know losing KCP is huge, but they've had these young guys in the wings forever. They have Strother too, who could step up. I feel like one of those guys will end up stepping up for them. I feel like Jokic has a hunger in him this year after last season and losing. That's just the way I'll go with them. I believe in Michael Malone as a head coach too, so I think he'll get the most out of that group.
Yeah, and I like them. I like all these teams. Like, I mean, that's a stat conference with OKC, Minnesota.
It is.
It's the man. I mean, yeah.
And you went under on all three of them, Marco. You just believe in the depth. Everyone's going to kind of be in that same 50-win bucket. Is that how you see it?
There are some years in the standings where like the 2 seed will have like 46 wins. It's crazy. Like I think it could be one of those years, and
Yes.
could be completely wrong. But that's kind of just the
And
direction I went.
we kind of talked about how good the East is, so that, maybe that's reflective of that for you.
That's true. Like 8, 9 of these East teams are going to be a battle every time they play. Like it'd be a tough.
More so than last year.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we have the Dallas Mavericks. Their over-under is set at 50.5. Your reigning finals losers. Where'd you guys go on the Mavs? Oh, laugh. Over Island. Why'd you go over on the Mavs?
So, I respect the Mavericks' run last year in the playoffs. I was very impressed with how they made out. I really think Luka is going to come back. I can't imagine after all the hate he got in this year's playoffs for his lack of defensive effort that he's not going to come back with a hunger. And maybe that's more of a playoff take than a regular season take. Like I think he still is going to take plays off, and care more about his offensive game. But I really think that's going to light a fire under him, and you could see the fire in his eyes in some of those games, especially as he ran through the Western Conference. I think I still really believe in him as a superstar, and I don't think he's going to settle for being a mediocre team. And then Kyrie just looked unbelievable through some of those playoff runs. Celtics were just a nightmare matchup for him, but he's clearly, I think he's changed something mentally where he's not as much of a concern as we've seen in previous years. Like there was a point where no GMs were even interested in taking him on their team, and now he's back to being, a star level player. I love the addition of Clay for them. I think it's really interesting pairing with Luka. I think Clay is going to have as much of a fire under him as anyone. Just coming off of, a couple of disappointing Warrior seasons. He's been coming off his injuries. And he still was averaging 18 points a game. Like, that's not nothing, especially in the NBA. I think he has the opportunity to do that, if not more. And those kind of like late in their career shooters are still really valuable. So I think he has something under him. I don't know if he can be, I think he'll probably be a defensive liability to some degree. Won't be the same defensive player that he was in the past, but yeah. So I like the pieces they have around them, and I also really love the way Derek Lively played. And I think he was still pretty raw last year. I think he takes another step as a rebounder and even as a facilitator as a big. So yeah, I gained some respect for the Mavericks through that playoff run, and I think they're going to be right in the mix in the top here. So I went over on them.
And Marco, 4 for 4 on the under so far. Why'd you go under on the Mavs?
Yeah, so the line is right where they were last year. They had 50 wins. I think the big thing is, losing kind of that defensive identity with Josh Green and Derek Jones Jr. I think they were sneaky, very important. And I like Clay, and I think it's a very team-friendly contract. I just don't know what we're going to get. I think the shooting could continue to decline, and he's not shooting well. I don't know. For some reason, I've just been thinking very negative thoughts about the Mavericks. So I kind of like the moves. I think Quentin Grimes is a fine player. Najee Marshall is a fine player. Respectable roster. But if I look at the Thunder, the Timberwolves, the Nuggets, I kind of just like them worse than all those teams. I know that's just the standings of last year, but I don't know. There's something I don't love about their long-term sustainability. Do I see them as this dangerous 50-plus win team? I don't know. And Kyrie's just been too normal. I think he's due to just have a meltdown. Do we trust a third straight year of Kyrie being in the right mindset? Maybe. Maybe he's happy in Texas, but I think the West is going to improve. I think some of the teams below them and the odds are going to be coming out hot. And I don't know about the defense.
Yeah, I'm with you on the defensive identity there. Losing Derek Jones, I think, is super massive for them. I wanted to make a point in Laugh's favor, though. The Mavs went 21-9 after the trade deadline, after they made the moves for Gafford and PJ Washington. So that is a big point in their favor for this season, getting to play a full season with those guys. My under comes down to Klay Thompson's fit. I love his 3-point shooting. I feel like that's exactly what they were missing in the playoff run. Or at least in the finals specifically, is what they were missing was Klay Thompson. But I don't know if I believe in him defensively. I feel like he's lost a step, laterally on defense. We've seen clips of him on the offseason kind of getting burnt by average Joe. So I just wonder how he'll do when he's thrown into that 3 role there next to kind of defensive liabilities in Luka, and I think Kyrie's decently capable defensively. He's pretty long for a guard. And then Kyrie also had a pretty healthy season with 58 games played. He has been super injured in the season before, 20 games the year before, 40 for the Nets the season prior. And then he had a 60-game season and then 29. So, he is out a lot. So they're going to have to really kind of hold it together without him. And I don't know necessarily if I believe in their other depth pieces behind those guys. They traded a bunch of firsts in those trades for Washington and Gafford. They only have their first next year and then 2026 and then 2031. So they don't have a lot of assets to make moves anymore. So it's 2031, 2026, 25, and that's it for their haul of picks going forward. So they're kind of stuck where they are. I feel like they're really hinging on the Klay Thompson fit, and I'm not sold on him personally.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And I think I should have mentioned the loss of Derek Jones Jr. because that is huge because they were a lot better of a defensive team than you would have thought last year. So I think they're going to be a much more mediocre, if not below average, defensive team as a result of that. But it remains to be seen. Like you said, PJ Washington, Gafford weren't there until the end of the season. So maybe that lifts tides there in terms of their defensive ability. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, Luka is so healthy every season too. He's plays so many games, 60 to 70 games every season. You can always rely on him, which is nice to have him. Him and Jokic, those guys. Tatum plays a ton too. It's good to have stars that you can count on. My overs tend to kind of fall on teams that I believe have the depth to sustain injuries or have players or stars that are notoriously healthy. So that's just kind of I scare away from the teams who have had injury issues in the past is kind of the way I look at these things. I don't know. That's just how I do it. Up next, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, whose over-under is set at 47.5. Where did you guys fall on the Grizzlies?
Oh, yeah.
This one was so obvious that I was going to be on the island here. I've been such a staunch Grizzlies hater for a bit now. I don't dislike them as a franchise. It just comes down to the shooting for me. And I will say, to eat my own words here, they did sign Luke Kennard recently, so that has made me, a little bit more in belief of their ability to shoot from the 3-point line, because he's I think he might have had the best 3-point percentage in the NBA last season. He shot, if I can pull up the number right now, if I can find him, I believe he shot
career 44%.
Career 44%, 45% last year, 54% the year prior. So just adding him back to a lineup that has Ja, who's 31% of 3-point shooter. Jaren Jackson, who struggled last year when given higher volume from 3. I'm sure he'll be more productive in a more limited role from 3. Adding him in with Edey there, who's definitely not a 3-point shooter, at least at this point in his career. Maybe he develops that eventually, but don't believe he has it yet. So I just don't believe in the shooting there. I don't believe in the health there. Desmond Bane's notoriously injured. Ja Morant has issues with health and other things. Jaren Jackson has been notoriously injured, and I don't necessarily believe in Edey yet. He was drafted high, yet a lot of people were out on him just as an NBA player in general. It was a weird class where he was either going to go in the top 10 or he was going to go in the second round. So it's such a funky fit there, especially shooting wise. We'll see how they all gel. I believe they could be one of the best teams in the West. I'm prepared to eat my words on this, but just health wise, they're a little too scary for me. And then shooting wise, I tend to believe in having more spacing than they do in that starting 5. And I didn't mention Smart as well. Same thing.
Yeah. So just to go over the past few years, they had 27 wins last year. Obviously had a lot of injuries. 51 the year before. 56 the year before that. So Jaw, Bain, Jaron, some of their deep depth guys, they've won a lot before. They had Smart. They had Edie. We have some new young guys, G. Jackson, Vince Williams. Kind of like we talked about Ant being this leader just through his play and his attitude. Jaw is a savior in Memphis, and I think if the Grizzlies stay healthy, like they have one of the best home court advantages. They're going to be a regular season team. Smart is a guy who brings a lot of experience winning games, not necessarily winning a title, but Smart's a winner. And I like their depth. I think guys like Aldama have played a lot consistently. Like Laravia could take stuff. They just have so many guys. I think the line is not really. It's makes sense because of the depth of the West, but I mean they've been way over this, and I think this is their best team they've had in a while. And I guess there's a reason Edie is the favorite to be Rookie of the Year. Like maybe it's all hype, but it seems like he'll make an impact. So I think I like them. I like them to do well in the regular season, but not necessarily. I don't necessarily like them as a championship contender. If that makes sense.
Sure. And Laugh.
Yeah. So I think you guys made some really good points. One thing I want to add is Steven Adams. As soon as he got injured last offseason, that was like the first pin that dropped, and then everything else after that, it kept falling apart for them. So that's a huge loss. He was a huge piece of their defensive identity, and I think that's a big reason why they drafted a guy like Edie as high as they did. I think he went higher than people were expecting to as a top 10 pick. But I like Edie a lot. I think he's a good fit with them. I think he gives them something, especially in the Western Conference with all of the size that's coming around. To have someone like that is a pretty significant addition. And I think the NBA is taking this weird shift of, bigs to go with the small ball, and it seems like it's going back to big depth now. So I do think having Edie is a great addition there. The other point I wanted to make is around the depth they have. I think it's very unique, the situation they had, where literally almost every relevant player for them decided to stop playing basketball last year, besides Jaren Jackson Jr. So that gave all of their young players an opportunity to play real NBA minutes, significant, and take the load on, and develop a lot more than normal back-end roster guys would be given the chance to. So I think that's an underrated piece that I think can help the Grizzlies a lot. And I think they can go 10 deep almost when you look at some of the guys that are playing real minutes last year. So I like their depth a lot. I love their star talent. I think they do have some chemistry together from those past years that Marco was talking about. So I think they can gel together pretty well and put together a really good season.
That's fair. I don't know if you believe in Derrick Rose as a backup guard. They kind of lack that backup point. Like, remember in the Grizzlies winning years, they had Tyus Jones, who I think is going to be a huge contributor for Phoenix this year. I feel like that's such a sneaky underrated loss for them, just having that safety net behind Jaw, because Jaw is notorious for getting hurt. I feel like he is a big loss. Adding Smart in, who, we love as Celtics fans, but you can't really rely on him to stay healthy either, and just a 3-point shot with him. G.G. Jackson last year was second worst in the NBA in offensive rating. He was a rookie. I get it. Youngest guy in the league. He'll improve, but I don't know if he's ready to play big minutes yet. I think Vince Williams can, to Marco's point in the 6-man conversation we had in the other pod, but I don't necessarily know if I believe in the depth as much as you do necessarily, but I could see where you're coming from. And I've watched Santi Aldama. I just don't really like him personally, but
No, that's a good point. I honestly haven't seen Derrick Rose play in a while, so I don't know how much of his step he has lost. So I don't know. It's not the worst player I can think of to have as a backup point guard either.
That's true.
But he had some good years, even on the Knicks. So I think there's something there. But that's a fair point.
I think they'll play a lot of Vince at point guard. Like, give me that first guy off the bench. I think he's going to be really, really important.
It's a good point.
And you don't want to rely on Derrick Rose at this stage for 50 wins. That's yeah.
Yeah. They weren't a team I consistently tuned into last season. Let's just say that. But yeah, we can move on to the Phoenix Suns, who are definitely a polarizing franchise here. Their over under is set at the same total, 47.5. Where did you guys fall on the Suns?
I meant to do this.
Put me on under with the Suns.
Yeah, laugh on Under Island on the Suns.
That's a gift.
Why are you
Thank
under?
You guys. So, I honestly, the Tyus Jones point you're just making, like, I do think that's a huge addition for them. So, I think that changes my perspective a little bit. But I never understood the Bradley Beal signing. The fit just does not make sense with them. They have a new owner that was trying to make flashy deals to try to get as much star power and make moves for them to win now. Obviously, having Kevin Durant on the team, they want to win now as quickly as possible. That being said, they're just a team I don't understand. I don't understand their chemistry on offense. I don't understand their defensive identity. That being said, I know they were a relatively good defensive team last year, surprisingly. So maybe they can surprise me a little bit more than I think there. But I just don't like the overall fit with the roster construction. I'm not been a Nurkic guy historically. He's very injury prone. KD is another year older, where I see him taking off more games than he has to stay more relevant. I think they're still a back-end playoff team, like over 500, but the 47.5 number is just a little too high for me given the competition in the West. And I think something goes wrong for them. They just feel like one of those teams that there's always going to be some type of drama there. So I love KD as much as anyone. He looks phenomenal at the Olympics. Love Devin Booker. So they could definitely prove me wrong just on their star talent alone. But overall team and overall basketball play, I'm not really a believer in what they bring to the table.
That's fair. And Marco and I have commented a lot about how we're kind of like, we don't know what to do on the Suns, so it's pretty funny. But Marco, why did you end up on the over with me?
Yeah, they're definitely one of those teams that it feels like anything can go wrong at any moment. So wouldn't feel comfortable putting money on them to win a lot of games. But I mean, quietly last year, they had 49 wins, and it was a mess. Beal was a mess. I mean, the West is deep, so they can be better and have a worse record, I think. I don't know. I like Budenholzer. I'm doing this more for the story. I just feel like he's going to come in, be a different voice. He's had a lot of good regular seasons before. Durant, I think, is one of those guys that's going to play until he's 55, and I'm not too worried about him, like, playing games and losing production. I think Booker is Booker. Like, I think they'll find a way. I think they're too talented to just be a mess again, and I'm betting on them to just clean some stuff up. And yeah, I think the Tyus Jones, Monty Morris adds Plumlee, solid pro at this stage. They have some pieces. Ryan Dunn, interesting draft pick, maybe the worst offensive player in the draft. So we'll see if he has a role at all. But yeah, they're a team also that you feel like they're desperately at any point looking at another move to go all in. So who knows if they make another move. They've done a good job doing kind of like cheap little deals. So they to me they're always going to be a buyer. So that helps too, more so than maybe some of the teams we talked about.
Yeah, I'm on the same wavelength as you there. I just feel like depth-wise, it's the most I actually believe in their depth of any Suns team we've seen in recent years. Like, they got Royce O'Neal mid-season last season, and he was, like, pretty important for them. Like, he's a really consistent shooter. He can D-up pretty well. I like Marco mentioned, Ryan Dunn, like, the best defensive player in the class. Like, he could play a role. They relied on guys like Josh Okogie in the past to kind of fill that role, and that guy cannot shoot, period. So it's been difficult to see. Tyus Jones is really what put it over the edge for me, though. Just getting a true game manager. You've been relying on Devin Booker to like handle all of the point guard duties, and being able to have like a true game manager off the bench to kind of clean up that bench unit, I feel like is going to be super important for their success this season. Around guys like KD, Beal, and their other stars too, just having another point guard in there. I don't necessarily love Nurkic, like the type of big he is, but you know, you can't love everyone on a team necessarily. So there's not much I could say positive there. And I think that they were like very unhealthy last year and they still got to 49 wins. So I just feel like they'll be, in that mix 49, 50 wins. I believe in Bud as a regular season coach. They feel like a team with a fire under them to prove that they're not, that they can actually win as a unit there and they don't need to like blow it all up. So I fell on the over. Next up, we can move on to the Sacramento Kings, whose over-under is set at 46.5 for next season. Where do you guys fall on the Kings?
There we go.
Oh, the first sweep of the day.
Yeah.
First sweep of the day. Okay, Marco, why don't you talk us through your Kings? I know you're a Kings fan, Sneaky.
Yeah, this is a regular season team if I've ever seen one. Kind of like the Grizzlies. Like, the big move is adding DeMar. Quietly, so the line is right where they were last year. Again, 46 wins last year, 48 wins the year before. So they've been competitive. DeMar is just a baller. I think he's a guy who's going to give them 75 games minimum, give you his all, made Chicago relevant. Like Keegan Murray, I think he's going to develop. Like, I think he's quietly been making strides. Great compliment around Sabonis, Fox, DeMar. Keon Ellis, we've talked about a lot on the pod. I think he's going to be a stud. We signed Monk. I like their team. I think they're fun. Devin Carter, sneaky. I think he's going to get minutes once he's back. Like, I just think they're a team that's going to play so hard. Kind of like the Orlando Magic. Like, they're just fun, and they're going to play hard, and their home fans are going to be rowdy. Like, to me, they're just... That being said, there's a lot of good teams in the West, and I don't know. So do I believe that they'll be ahead of, like, maybe Dallas, Denver? Maybe, honestly. Maybe they're just consistency throughout the year. I don't know. To me, they scream, and it seems like you two, like, they just scream regular season tryhards and then tough first-round exit.
Yeah. Laugh, why'd you join him on the over? And me.
Yeah. I love the DeRozan ad. I've always been a huge fan of his. I'm really interested to see if he can, like, I think I've mentioned this on a previous pod, but develop like a Vince Carter like late 3-point shot to his career. I don't know if he needed to do that on the Bulls with their current like makeup, but having Sabonis be kind of the like primary facilitator almost, like, I think DeRozan developing more of a 3-point shot would be huge for them. We'll see if he actually does it. But I love the ad. I really think they're like every game is going to be like 125, 124, and DeRozan and Fox carry them to the end. Like, having another clutch player like DeRozan alongside Fox and shot maker at the end of those games, I think is going to be huge for them. So I think they're going to be a winning a lot of close games. Yeah, I like the team. Love Keegan Murray. I think he'll continue improving. I think he had a great year last year. So, yeah, I just like the team a lot.
Fair. Only thing I'll add, Marco mentioned that the Magic and the Kings seem like regular season, darlings. And those are two teams that I put a little bit of money on to win the East and the Western Conference, just as like a long shot, 20-1, 25-1. So I it just feels like a regular season team. There's so much energy. The Kings are like the energy team. You light the beam, there's a lot to get excited about there. And I think it's one of the only teams where DeRozan can fit because they have all those spacers around him. Fox has learned to shoot more consistently. He struggled in the early going in his career, but he's become like a heavy volume and good percentage 3-point shooter. He shot last season, shot 36.9% from three on very high volume. So I believe in the three there. They got Herter, they got Monk, they got Keegan Murray, these good spacers. And DeRozan, when he was in Chicago for his first season, I mentioned this in another pod, he had like a fire under him, finally playing for like a new franchise, a team that he wanted to kind of show out for in his first season. So I feel like it'll be the same with him and the Kings. And he's got that clutch gene in him, and they're going to close out a lot of close games, I feel like, more so. He's like, it's good to have a guy like him to rely on, and then Sabonis can kind of, run the offense and feed to these guys who are consistent shooters, and they're going to play with a lot of energy. So definitely like the Kings. My only concern is just their depth. I feel like they only have like 7 or 8 guys who are like true NBA players, and then it kind of falls off. So hopefully they can stay healthy. But if they do, true believer in them.
Yeah, they're probably my second favorite team after the Celtics. And
Yeah, they're fun.
and part of it's just the random factor, but yeah, I feel like they've been really fun the past couple of years, and I like all their players.
Me too. Um, Next up, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, whose over-under is set at 45.5 for next season. Where did you guys fall on the Pelicans?
Oh yeah,
Oh, wow. The under sweep. Did we have one of those last pod?
I think so. Yeah.
maybe
Kinda
like
Sixers.
Wizards, Nets.
Oh, Sixers. Yeah, Sixers for sure. That's
Yeah.
a good one. Laugh, do you want to kick off the Pelicans?
Yeah. So I think they're a really interesting team. I actually was a buyer on them last year. I really liked, I love Trey Murphy. Um, I would not call myself a Zion believer. I've seen the flashes, but I haven't seen him consistently put it together for long enough to make me feel confident in him. So that scares me. The main reason I went under on this is I just don't understand how their roster fits together. And the move they made to get DeJounte Murray is interesting. I think, he could be a good fit for them. If he played like he did last year, and he's, not as good of a defensive player, I think they struggle. I do think he has to be somewhat ball dominant, and I also think Zion kind of has to be that for them to be successful. And then you have Brandon Ingram, who really needs the ball in his hands to be successful. He just doesn't fit. They're trying to get rid of him, but no one's buying. Like, I don't understand the direction, they're going. They lost Valanciunas, so I know you mentioned on another pod, like, you think Tice might be a good regular season contributor, and I agree. I like Tice. I like him as a role player, though. I don't like him as a starter kind of guy, and so I think they're at least a player or two away. And like I said, I don't see how the roster fits together really. The one shining spot I think is really Trey Murphy. Because I think if he does take another leap this year, then that could change. And he becomes more of a two-way, kind of dominant player. But I don't know. I think you just have a very weird roster construction, weird spacing. I don't really see how it works together.
Yeah, the roster feels incomplete for how far in the off season we are. It's very bizarre. It doesn't necessarily fit. But yeah, Marco, why'd you also go under?
So a fun fact: the Pelicans, previously the New Orleans Hornets, have never had back-to-back winning seasons. So if they have a winning season this year, that'll be the first time they've ever had 3 straight years above 500. So this over would be historic. I think the more that time goes on, the lower I am on DeJounte Murray. I feel like kind of forgot. Like, he had a pretty bad exit from the Spurs. Like, he was just not meshing well. And I feel like that's a system where, like, good, smart players fit the system and, like, want to be there. And he just wasn't that mold. Then the Hawks gave a lot to get him. And now the return was, like, way less. So I feel like if you go on like Hawks Reddit, Twitter, they all hate him. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what he is. He seems to be just not a great locker room guy. And I mean, their line is pretty far down. I mean, they had 49 wins last year. So they got DeJounte. They were this big winner of the offseason, and their line is pretty 3.5 games lower. Like, yeah, we don't know what their team's going to look like. Is Ingram going to get traded? Zion is kind of an injury threat. Like, there's only so much. Like, I like Herb and Trey Murphy too, but like, what are they? They're not. Just don't trust this team as much as probably all the teams we've talked about so far. And I think DeJounte's baggage is a real thing, and this is a team that's not strong enough to overcome that.
Yeah. DeJounte Murray had his career high in turnovers last season in 2.6, and that's weird in an offense where Trae Young was kind of operating the point guard duty. So him kind of sliding over and being their de facto point guard is kind of a weird fit, I think. I don't know how much it all makes sense. Brandon Ingram's like he slows the offense down, kind of finds his spots, and they feel like they have kind of a run and gun team. It seems like a team that wants to play small now with Zion at the 5 in spurts because they don't have a center anymore, really. I think Nance was like sneaky important for them defensively too behind JV. I feel like that's like a pretty big loss. Like I respect JV, like his minutes, Valanciunas in bursts. He would provide some offense, and then Nance would like provide a lot of defensive switchability and versatility. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife, can play the 4 and the 5. Like those are two pretty big losses, and I don't think Murray is enough necessarily to like eat up that. And then they lost Dyson Daniels, who's a good upside flyer in defensive guard for them too. It just feels a little clunky. Love Trey Murphy, loved Zion, love Zion too. There's a little too much risk in like the injuries with Zion and Ingram too. I don't know. It's a weird one. I've fallen on the under because just don't love their off season moves necessarily.
Yeah, to me, they scream play-in team this year.
Yeah,
Like that, I don't know if I see them being above like the 6th seed.
it's weird as for a team who traded 2 firsts to get like a win now piece, and we're all under on them. It's funny how that ends up working out, but
Yep.
maybe it'll all come together. Maybe they'll move Ingram and get a big somehow, and we'll flip. I think that's a real possibility too. And I love Herb, his defensive identity, Trey Murphy, Zion. Like they got a good bunch, but just no center. Very weird. Um, okay. So the Warriors are up next. Their over under is set at 43.5 for next season. Where'd you guys fall on the Warriors? Oh, me on the under alone. Okay, so the Warriors are an interesting team where, like, I don't know. I don't necessarily believe in Draymond Green anymore. He's leads the league for like the last 2 seasons in turnover rate. Like he just turns the ball over like a tremendous amount. And maybe it's because he's operating out of that like Sabonis role and kind of just like constantly passing to guys on cuts and stuff. But other guys operate that role a little bit better than him. He doesn't have the 3-point shot. I didn't like what I saw from Wiggins last season. I'm just not a Kuminga guy either. He hasn't shown to be like a 3-point shooter. He's shown that he can score like at the rim very well, and I don't know. I just don't necessarily believe in him as like a star. They've been more reluctant to trade Podziemski than Kuminga, it feels. So maybe they've seen things that like the hype fans haven't necessarily seen with Kuminga. And I've watched him quite a bit. I love Podziemski. I think he brings a lot of energy to that team. Offensive rebounding is a hustle guy, like a Josh Hart type. I like him a lot. Curry's another year older. They got Melton, they got healed. If you're not a believer in Clay, then they upgraded. But like, I don't know. I feel like they're just still missing something, and the West has just gotten so much better, and they feel like they're a piece away. Like they've been trying so hard to get marketed, and I feel like that's for good reason. I feel like they don't believe that they have a contender there yet. So I'm in the 40s, like maybe 40, 41. I'm close to the line. Definitely not super out on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I come back to the piece away thing. I think when you have Steph at this point in his career, you have to be playing to win, right? Like it doesn't make sense. Like you can't stick him on that roster and just expect him to be on like a losing team after his career he's had. So he's still clear, like he's barely gotten a little bit less efficient at the end of last year. Like maybe the decline's starting, but I don't think it's happening yet. I think Clay, it was just his time was up there. I don't think he fit with that team anymore, unfortunately, which I think that's a positive by subtraction, just for the Warriors specifically though. Like I do think Clay can still fit well with the Mavericks, but yeah, I like the additions they've had. We talked about Slow-Mo, Kyle Anderson, being a big loss for the Timberwolves. I think that's a big add for the Warriors in providing more defensive versatility, another rebounder. I like Kuminga, and I don't know. I think they have to give him more opportunity this year with Clay being gone. They do need someone else to pick up some of that scoring. So I don't know. I think he's got something there. And I do think they're going to be a buyer at some point. Maybe it's not in the off season. Maybe it's before the All-Star break. But I think they have a chance to add one more piece and be a pretty legitimate contender. I don't know. I think Markkanen's perfect. There's a very clear reason why they're going so hard for him. And I think that's one of those teams, like the Jazz, we'll talk about later, but I think Danny Ainge is going to be all in on trying to get Cooper Flag this year. And I think their roster is built for that. I don't think Lord really makes sense on the Jazz, so I do think there's still a pretty good chance that he ends up with the Warriors. But you just know Danny Ainge isn't going to settle on a trade that he's not clearly winning. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening with that. But yeah, I'm a believer in Steph. I think he can carry a team up to a little bit over 500 just on really him alone. But I think the pieces around him are still good enough where he can get there.
Yeah, I just feel like they lack that true second star, which is, that could potentially be Laurie. And last year, Kerr was having a hard time managing all of the different pieces who are like the same level of good. They had like 10 or 12 guys who they're just throwing in the lineup at times with Moody and Saric and Trace Jackson Davis and all these different looks for that team. So I just feel like they lack that like true star. And Clay kind of felt to me like the first domino to fall in like the end of the Warriors dynasty. Maybe that's like overly dramatic. And they still have 2 more years on their deal each. So, I'm sure they're going to try to go all in, but it seems like the price for Markkanen might be out of budget for them. Maybe they're not willing to risk their future to go that direction. It could just be another mid-league season in the beginning of the end. But yeah, Marco, what do you have to say?
I think Steph is the player in the West that I trust the most, aside from maybe Jokic. They're probably 1-2 for people that I would like not want to bet against.
True.
And yeah, we've talked a lot about, they added Melton, Buddy Hield, Slow-Mo. I like all those guys a lot. I think they're all, good passers, good shooters. I think just a fun, like, sneaky deep team. Pods. I mean, Kuminga, I kind of go back and forth on. I think he's a good fit alongside some of these guys. Super athletic. Just gives them a little something different. Moody's been consistently underrated, I think. Just hasn't gotten minutes. I just think I'm kind of a believer in Clay's decline, and I think they got better. And Curry's not done. Curry's going to have a few more years where they're in the mix, and they're going to be really annoying in the playoffs. I know that's not regular season win totals, not the playoffs, but I think I told myself, come on, it's Steph Curry. I feel like he's too good, and maybe that's a sucker bet though. Maybe that's what they want you to think, and it's low because they're just not going to be good. But I just believe in their roster, and I think Wiggins sneakily. I don't know what was going on last year, but apparently had some personal stuff going on. I feel like he was just terrible last year, and like if he's just anything better, like he's a real player. We didn't even talk about him at all. Like they have like 8-9 legit rotation pieces, which is more than some of these other teams.
Yeah, it's true. And in a season that was complete chaos, they were over that number. Or were they over? Yeah. What was their and
46?
They were 46. Yeah. So they were over that number in a complete chaos season. So I totally take your guys' points on that. And moving on, we have the Houston Rockets, whose over-under is set at 43.5 for next season. Where did you guys fall on the Rockets? It's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Yeah. Oh, the clean sweep. It's a tough one yet. The clean sweep on the overs. All right, Marco, do you want to kick off the Houston Rockets? I saw you making some facial expressions.
I think another team that quietly was kind of a mess last year ended 500, ended 41-41. They won a lot of games without Sengun at the end of the year. They got hot late, made a push for the play-in. So we'll see how they fit at full strength. They got Reed Shepherd, who could be the best player in the draft, maybe right away and long term. So we'll see. I mean, I love me some Tari Eason off the bench. I think they're too talented, and like the problem is, can they consistently beat some of these teams ahead of them? Like, I could see them beating up on the teams below them. I could see them beating up on some of the East teams. I think if they stay healthy, they have a shot. you know. Um, Jalen Green, we've talked a lot about him potentially getting moves. I don't know. I think they're just too fun to like. I want them to win games, and I think what Udoka is a good coach, and hate to say it, but I feel like he's not going to let them losing record.
Yeah, Marco, just a quick shout out to Tari Eason. And players that played 20 minutes or more last season, he led the NBA in defensive rating. Isn't that pretty insane?
Yeah, I think he's really good. I think he could end up being like their third or fourth best player. I know that's crazy considering who they have, but that might not be true because if they have Sengun,
there's so many
guys. Yeah. I think Sengun and Amen are probably my personal two favorite guys there, but I think Tari's gonna be a guy. He just makes so many winning plays, and like he plays the role of like annoying offensive rebounder, can shoot, will instigate a little bit. Like they have sneaky pieces to be an annoying team.
Yeah, I love those types of annoying guys like him and Ahmed. They just such pests, like defensively, like Jalen Suggs. They're great styles of players. They're so fun to watch. But yeah, Laugh, why did you also fall on the overside?
I just think this is maybe the deepest team I've ever seen. Like, I'm not even exaggerating with that. Like, it's an insane roster. Like, they are pretty legitimately 11 deep when you look at some of their bench guys. Like, I think they can all play legitimate minutes, which you don't need that to be, a good team, but it doesn't hurt. And I think they have assets they can move. They've shown some degree of doing that for guys like Dylan Brooks, going for Van Fleet. So I think they could even make more moves with some of the assets they have. I think to your point around Udoka, like he's a great coach. And I think he's going to get the most out of them, especially with a young roster. We saw it last year. They made a huge leap. I think they can continue that trajectory. I think they honestly have a shot to be, a high 40, low 50 win team, which feels crazy, given how competitive the West is. But I'm a huge believer in Reed Sheppard after what I've seen in the Summer League. He's one of those guys where you just watch him start playing and you're like, oh, he's got it. Like he just reminds me so much of like a Devin Booker type. And I think it was interesting, Marco, you said like Sengun and Amen Thompson are the two guys. Like to me, it's Sengun and Reed Sheppard already. Like if I had to choose two people on the roster, like I would have long term. I think that just betting on who would end up having the best careers long term, I've seen, he really has that it factor. I think he's going to be potentially a star in the league. So I really like what they put together. I think they're not even done, in the off season, or could be a very clear pre All-Star break team to, make a move and make a push at the end of the season too. So I like what they're doing a lot.
Yeah, me too. It's a good point about Reed Sheppard. And the thing he has that Amen doesn't is the shot. Amen Thompson's really struggled, and Reed Sheppard is already has that element to his game, which is so vital in today's NBA. One note about Fred VanVleet there, just having that game manager point guard who's just an immaculate passer, can stretch the floor too, is huge. He, last season was fourth in the NBA in assist to turnover ratio, which I meant to make a comment on earlier and I forgot. But Tyus Jones, did you know that he broke the record for assist to turnover ratio in a single season last season?
No. Wow.
He might break it again with the Suns now with all those weapons there. So it's pretty exciting. But yeah, just the Rockets have so much talent. We didn't even mention Jabari Smith too. Just 3-and-D, long, almost 7 feet tall, just an insane four next to Sengun, who's an offensive dynamo. And then you got Jalen Green, who can score at every level. You got Cam Whitmore off the bench, who can kind of, provide so much offense, that offensive spark. Dylan Brooks is a solid wing now in today's NBA, provides a good defensive edge to him too, kind of like what Marcus Smart does too, but maybe a little bit lesser of a level. They're just super deep. Steven Adams, we didn't even mention. They're super deep. And I just believe that Udoka will figure out how to mix and match and get the most out of that bunch. And then they have the Suns first round picks too. So if the Suns are we suck, then they're going to be the team calling and being like, hey, you want your 2025 pick back? Get into this draft, get in, and we'll take on KD. So Just a lot of upside there.
That would be an interesting fit.
If they want to rush their window, But
And with Reed, like he shot under 30% from three in summer league and was still the best player in summer league. Like he looked so good and wasn't even shooting well. So it's scary to think of like he could just be just good right away.
Yep.
Their rotations are going to be interesting. They have some decisions to make there.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking up the pick and if they actually do have Phoenix's 2025 first. I believe they do. It says they have OKC or Phoenix's, and there's some like swaps, but it's just like so many words there that I'm not going to read through. But I do believe that they have the Suns 2025. So that if the Suns really do struggle, then the Houston Rockets would probably be the first team calling. So it's interesting. I don't know if it'd be KD, Beal, or Booker, but they would they can make an effort for any of them. And then next up, we have the Los Angeles Lakers, whose over-under is set at 43.5. What do you guys think on the Lakers?
All right, Marco on Under Island.
Oh my God,
Marco on Under
Island in
Island.
a long time.
Yeah, so talk us through the under there in the Lakers.
Yeah, so I said I believe in Steph and Jokic the most. I would say LeBron is probably third in who I believe in.
I had the same exact thought before I thought I was going to talk first. That's so fun.
Like, I would never probably bet against LeBron in this situation. But I think the teams around them just got better. I think all these teams we talked about, like even the Pelicans, who I'm pretty low on, you could argue they got better. I just don't know if there's enough wins around. And this line's pretty low, I would say. Like, that's a low over-under for a LeBron AD team. So I think the nature of the West, they could be around 500 and still be in the play-in mix, and that's just kind of where I see them. I see them being kind of like 7 to 9 seed. Maybe Bronny plays. It's a feel-good story. Like, Connect is a good. Everyone's like, oh, he's going to be good right away. I don't know. I don't love the team. LeBron keeps doing things we've never seen at his age, so I'm not going to say he's going to slow down. But I don't know. I just have to put someone under these teams like the Rockets, the Warriors. So I just see them taking a step. With that being said, yeah, I would not against LeBron.
Guess how many seasons of the past 5 they've went over this total of 43.5 wins?
4.
2.
Marco got it. It's 2. Marco, you're very good at
Well,
trivia.
just because we
Anyone
had
ever
so many
told you that?
COVID years, like I feel like they were never that good. Like,
Yeah.
like the short
They-
years kind of made it cheap. Like, I don't know. I just feel like they're hot and cold, and I don't love their depth. I don't know. Who did they?
Yep,
They have anybody like besides Connect? Did they? Sorry, but
You're good. That I would have to check actually, who their big ads are. It's really truly a belief in LeBron resurgence playing alongside his son. I kind of feel like he's gonna have an extra level of energy or like aura around him. For his age 40 season, playing alongside his son for the first time is kind of what it's all come to. Like this is like the pinnacle of what he's wanted for his whole basketball career. And he's been playing with all these stars in Team USA. I feel like he's going to have a fire on him after watching like all these winners compete alongside him. Just having that more camaraderie with AD on the Olympic team is fun too. I'm sure they're talking about like, maybe they're talking to other stars, trying to bring other stars in for whatever pick equity that they have left. It probably won't be anyone playing in the Olympics though. But yeah, I don't know. It feels low, 43.5 for the Lakers team. It just feels like they're going to be kind of going all out during the regular season and trying to grind out wins. I do believe in Austin Reeves, as you do, Marco. I believe in D'Angelo Russell offensively. Like he controls like a lot of the offense and is just an absolute sniper these days. Just knocks down threes at an extremely high rate. I think they just have enough there. I'm not like saying that they're going to be the best team in the West, but maybe like missing the play-in by being the 6th seed or being in the play-in. but above this total. So just lightly over. And Laugh?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that Connect really is the perfect ad for that roster. You know, like I think he's exactly what they've needed, a big shooting kind of guy that they really like. They haven't surrounded LeBron with the right type of people in a few years now, and they've still been relatively successful. But to me, more than that, it even just comes down to LeBron and AD. It's hard to bet against two stars like that where we've watched in the Olympics. I think they've been arguably the two most impactful players on the team so far, and it's been pretty impressive to watch. LeBron is just a freak of nature, obviously, and he's going to continue to play well, it seems like. So I'm not betting on his decline, and AD looks better than Embiid right now. You know, like it's just unbelievable how good he still is. So I think they have the star power to be easily over a 500 team. I mean, I'm not gonna. I tend to agree with you guys that I don't think they're like a top 4 seed by any means. But I also just wouldn't bet on them to be less than 500 with the roster they have. So yeah, it's just mostly a bet on LeBron and AD star power.
Yeah, and in that playing game against the Pelicans, I really thought they were going to lose. Like, and there was a game before that. I think they played the Pelicans like for that tiebreak before they played the Pelicans again. And they just looked really, really good, like fighting for that playoff seed. And I was just really impressed by what I saw with them. I feel like they still have some fight in them, and yeah, their two stars just look immaculate still. So wouldn't count them out quite yet.
Something we haven't talked about, I don't think, in any pod yet, and this could be a fun future topic. JJ Redick's their head coach. I mean, that's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what the hell is that team going to be like?
I know.
I mean,
That is, yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I almost think of it as like for any NFL fans out there, it's like to me, it's going to be like a Kyle Shanahan type of situation where like you have a really great schemer, a really great like basketball mind, but he hasn't coached before, so who knows how he'll be as a game manager, as a chemistry builder, you know, as a guy, if can he really take control of the locker room, or is it just going to be LeBron's team? Like, I tend to think the latter. So
Yeah.
I think I think LeBron's basically a player coach at this point, and but him and Redick together, putting their minds together, I could produce some really great things. So I'm really interested to see how that will turn out.
Yeah, I'd argue it doesn't really matter who their head coach is because, you know, LeBron's their head coach anyway. But I definitely agree with Laugh's point. Like getting another like really sharp basketball mind in the locker room and just having someone like that, all he does is think and generate like ideas for the team is unique instead of, you know, him being like a player and, you know, having to also play as well as like think like a coach. And then the only other thing I wanted to say was really that it was a little embarrassing, the whole Dan Hurley thing for them. So you know, I just kind of felt bad for them that they were going so hard after him. They were just like, psych, I'm going back to UConn. But I think JJ Redick was a good option.
Maybe this will be controversial. I think it was all staged. Like, I think they were just trying to get Hurley more money, or Redick more, or sorry, trying to get less money to Redick by like downplaying the coaching market. Like, it just, the whole thing felt forced, felt staged. Like, Woj was tweeting it all like live as it was happening. Like, you don't really get that kind of insight into what's happening unless it's real.
That's true.
You know? So, like, I don't know. It felt off to me.
Yeah, and get Hurley more money from UConn too, you know? That makes sense.
Because they're kind of like friends, JJ. Like, I feel like it's hard to have your friend
It's a very
head
unique
coach.
situation.
I get that, you know, it's LeBron's team, but it'll be interesting. He's going to be so hands off. Like, no, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a soap opera.
Yeah, and then speaking of, we just talked about JJ Redick, his former team's up next, the Los Angeles Clippers. Their over-under is set at 40.5. Where did you guys fall on the Clippers? I know where Marco went. Yes.
I knew I would be on Under Island after listening to the previous pods here.
So, Laugh, why are you on Under Island on the Clippers?
So we've talked about a few teams where, you know, it looks like it might be the beginning of the end, and I have never felt it more for a team than I feel about the Clippers. Like, this is one of my favorite in the West right now in terms of an over-under bet. if you're talking about the guys you can rely on the most and you trust the most, Kawhi is on the bottom of that list. I just don't rely on him at this point. He bowed out of the Olympics, which honestly is more in favor for you guys for the over, that he saved his body for the NBA rather than the Olympics. But yeah, just relying on him another year to carry the load there. You lose Paul George to take some of that load off of him. You rely more on James Harden, who did fit better with them last year than I was expecting. So I will give him that credit, but I think losing Paul George is going to be pretty significant there. And then as soon as Kawhi goes down, which seems like he inevitably will, you're putting James Harden on a team with who? Like, I don't see. I know Norman Powell has played well in the past, but you guys mentioned it on the Hot Takes pod. He's actually been declining. He's still a high producer, but maybe that's more of a factor of Paul George getting added there and adding James Harden, right? That takes a lot off of his plate. But I just don't see how that team can be successful without having like star players around Harden to help space the floor and have people to facilitate to. Because I still am a believer in Harden. I'm kind of out on believing in Kawhi at this point, as talented as he is. So, that's where I stand with the Clippers.
Marco, why are you on over with me?
Yeah, we kind of have the juxtaposition of, it does feel like it's kind of the end of an era, but it is the start of a new era. They're a new arena, completely new rebrand. I just maybe that's all stupid hype that's not going to affect basketball at all. But I feel like that's a real thing. Like, their fans are going to be hyped up. They're finally not just in the basement of Staples Center. Like, I just see them as a similar-ish to the Lakers, like, should be around 500. Another fun fact. I love these little fun facts going through the old standings. Guess the last time the Clippers had a losing record. Which year?
It's tough because they had like Blake Griffin and such in those days.
I think it's got to be after the Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, CP3 era and before the like Kawhi era. So,
do you think it even was, or was it even before that? Did they have a bad season in between?
The middle season. I don't know. 2017.
2011.
I'll go like. Yeah, I was gonna say something. I was gonna go late. It's crazy.
That's pretty impressive. Like, I know that's not completely relevant to this team, but it's a team that's been winning games. I don't know. There's something about there. I like. We've talked about the moves like Chris Dunn, Batum, Derrick Jones. I like their ads. Kevin Porter Jr. Who knows what he's gonna be like, but. I feel like Kawhi, I don't know if I believe in him that much, but I don't know. I have to stick with my hot take that they're going to be okay.
Yeah, it's like a team that's just chock full of vets and a team that has no reason to lose, and setting their over-under for me just like at the 500 line feels a little disrespectful. I get that they lost Paul George, which is massive. I won't downplay it. But, Derrick Jones Jr. provides a defensive identity alongside their two stars. Getting Nick Batum in, just a true veteran, is solid. Like, they're not bad moves. I still like Zubac as an NBA center. He's just very solid. Their team just feels better than that. And like Marco said with the rebrand and the new arena thing, they're going to be trying to win games. There's no reason for them not to. They don't feel like a team that's just eager to sell. Like, if anything, they're going to be buying with whatever they have left. I just think it's a play-in team, probably. Something like that. Maybe maybe out of the play-in marginally, like with the Lakers type of thing. Like, I could flip-flop them, but that's where I'm at.
Maybe this is the year of the Bones Highland Renaissance. He figures it out. Comes their season.
Well, he'll play the Russ. He'll probably play the Russ role, right? Alongside Powell there off the bench. So maybe.
Yeah, their bench consistently has been pretty solid. So that's true. Powell's numbers have been declining. Like, it'll be interesting to see who's in their rotation and how productive. I guess there is who's going to really score after. Who do you think their second leading scorer will be? Powell.
Well, Powell's become more efficient. It's not like he's, like he shot 43.5% from three last year. It's not like his numbers just have fallen off a cliff, but like his efficiencies went up. So just, volume of attempts when you have stars around him, it's always going to decline. So
just furthering my point, makes me feel good that you said that. That's true. His shooting was.
I'm with you here,
I
Mark.
forgot
I'm gonna defend
Harden
you.
will probably be their second scorer, but
Yes,
for sure.
It's okay.
Who's next?
Anyway, we have the San Antonio Spurs up next. This is going to be an interesting one. Their over-under is set at 36.5. Where did you guys fall on the Spurs?
Under sweep. I like
Under
it.
sweep on
I
the
thought I was going to
Spurs.
be on an island on this one.
I kind of did too.
All right. Marco, you want to kick us off on the unders of the Spurs?
So
Has to laugh too.
very quietly, the Spurs are in the midst of their worst run in franchise history. It's a team that's consistently throughout the eras they've been solid, and 36 wins. Their line set at 36.5. 36 wins would be their best season since 2019. So they've been pretty bad for a while. I just don't know. I mean, there's 12 teams we just talked about that they're going to be playing a lot. Going to be making trips to the East Coast. I just don't know if they're going to win that many games. Like, they can make a lot of big jumps. They can be a solid 33, 34 win team, which I think is pretty strong with this roster. I don't know. I like the vet moves. Like, I like CP3, I like Barnes, but I like them more as locker room guys and like culture guys than win now players. And it seems to me like if they get a stud in next year's draft, like that's kind of in their best interest. So I just don't see them being close to 500, and I don't trust that they would regularly be beating like all these teams we talked about. And they're gonna have to get the over. Like, there's only so many times you can play the Jazz and the Trailblazers.
Yeah, laugh.
Yeah, I think they're just one more year away. Like, I think next year their over-under line is going to be like 45, 46 wins, and they're going to be in that conversation. It's just because Wemby's going to take another step, I think this is one of those rare cases where I think Wemby could even be in the MVP conversation with like a relatively worse team, just because I think he could put up ridiculous numbers. I think he'll definitely be Defensive Player of the Year conversation too, just like last year. So it's tough because you want to believe in the Wemby hype, but I just don't think they have a roster behind him that can support him enough at this point in his career. And he's definitely, I think he was better last year than I was expecting. I thought he was going to come out a little bit more raw, and I think like the first month or two he was, but after that he just kind of exploded. So I'm there on the hype with him. I love the add of CP3 for his longevity, and even for this year, I think that does make them better. But I just don't think it's enough to push them over the edge of being like a play-in team yet. And to your point, I don't think that's in their best interest. Like, I think it makes sense to get another guy, like go for like a top 10 pick and get another solid piece with their roster. So yeah, I think they're just a year away from being quite that relevant in the like high 30s, low 40s.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you here. I am kind of on the Victor Wembanyama potential MVP train, as I mentioned on the Hot Takes pod. I got it at 30-1, and then it moved to 18-1, which is just it's crazy how much the hype has really moved already just throughout the offseason alone. But I guess maybe that's
viewers, they've been hopping on
it. Yeah, our two viewers. Exactly. Yeah. Those two guys swayed the market. But but yeah, I think I'll try to paint the picture in a more positive light, at least because like I really do think getting CP3 like a true point guard in the room is going to be so huge for Wembanyama's development. Getting like just a veteran solid wing in Harrison Barnes to kind of maybe teach Sohan a few things, or brand him off the bench, Keldon Johnson, just how to be a little bit more efficient with like the types of shots they're taking. I feel like that's really, it's going to be valuable for these young players' growth. So it feels like a season where they brought in these mentors for the young guys more so than where they're going to be, really fighting for playoff berths. But I could totally see it being like a CP3 season when he was with the Thunder for his first year, where they did, make the playoffs barely. That is a route that I could see, but I just think the West is a little too stacked, so I'll go under, but not so far under.
Yep. I have to say I got 1B at 35-1.
Damn, you beat me.
Wow.
Damn. Where was my DM? Or text? You should have hit me up.
I think I did. I think we definitely did that.
Maybe I just got it at 30 in like a different book or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Up next, we have the Utah Jazz, whose over-under is set at 27.5. I kind of have a feeling where we're all going to go on this, but let's do it anyways.
Just kidding.
Wow.
I
don't know. I think Marco might have just made a last-second decision there.
No, I knew because we both had the same hot take where we were putting the Jazz as the worst record in the Western Conference. But yeah, Laugh, why'd you go under on the Jazz?
Yeah, I think I spoiled this one earlier in this podcast. It's really just comes down to Danny Ainge, right? Like, I think he's clearly going to go in the Cooper Flag market. I don't think I think keeping Lowry is fine, but they've kept him for a long enough period now where like it just doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of the direction of the rest of the roster that they're going. So I think they do end up moving him for a really great deal, and they continue to build up picks just like the Thunder have and have a similar trajectory to that type of team. I do like their young talent a lot. I love Keontae George. I like some of the other pieces around him. I do think they're just missing that star player, so I think they're going to go all in for the Cooper Flag market. I don't see a reason for them to try to compete this year. They're just not there yet with their current roster. So, yeah, this was a pretty easy one for me.
Marco?
Yeah. To their credit, they've been sort of a graceful tanker rebuilder. Like, they obviously traded Donovan Mitchell and Gobert and got a good haul for them. But like they had 31 wins last year, 37 the year before. So they've had two not terrible years considering their roster and considering like their vision. And it's a franchise that historically just isn't putting up 20-win seasons. I went back since their start in 1974. They've only been under 27 wins 6 times, which is kind of, and most of them are when they just started, like the New Orleans. So they've rarely been like bad. That being said, I think it's clear they're playing for the future and just what's tough is like they could be the 14 seed and quietly have like 28 wins. They could just sneak some wins in, but I just don't know. And we don't know who they're going to trade, what their team's going to look like. I think they play their young guys. I think they had one stinker year. I think they have a historically bad year. But to be fair, like they haven't really done that yet. They haven't gone full Piston Wizard. Like they kind of have that tanking integrity.
Yeah. I agree with everything both you guys said. I mean, it's just a team that like has a reason to be bad. Not many of the other teams on this list, if any, have a reason to be bad. So, they're a team who is already selling their pieces. They're a team who Danny Ainge loves to get into these draft classes with high draft capital, accumulate as many picks as he can. He drafted Tatum, he drafted Brown, so maybe it's another notch on the belt and get him Cooper Flag for the Jazz team. I think we're all kind of in unison on this team just making a move and getting worse, de facto because they've lessened their roster and continue to develop their youth. So I'm with you both. Last team where we did not quite fly through this, but we're on the Portland Trailblazers, the final team here. I feel like it's been a fun conversation. The over-under for the Blazers is set at 21.5, the lowest of the Western Conference. Where did you guys fall on the Blazers? I know.
That's a wild sweep.
That's that's an ugly
I
oversweep.
don't feel good about that at all.
No, no.
Me neither. Which one of you guys wants to kick off the Blazers on the ugly sweep?
I can go for it.
Okay.
So I know you guys have talked a good amount about Scoot. I was a huge fan of his as a veteran for Rookie of the Year last year in the 1B, Rookie of the Year race. Came to my senses. 1B at a plus number a little bit into the season, so we were good there. But yeah, I like what they've done, relatively speaking. I think the Klingon move is weird, but I don't think they're done yet in terms of making roster moves to make a little bit more sense. And clearly, given Rob Williams' injury history, I think having another guy there does make sense. It's a weird fit with Ayton for sure, but I think there might be a world where they can play a double big lineup and have Ayton be a little bit more of like 3-point shooting, like facilitator-ish kind of player and develop that part of his game. But I'm not sure. I'm interested to see how that works out. I think they're going to try to move Jeremy Grant too. I've been seeing some rumors about that, trying to and potentially going to the Lakers, which would be a pretty interesting fit too. But so yeah, I mean, I think Scoot takes a leap this year. I think he'll be inefficient still, but I think he's going to put up numbers. I think that's going to help them get over the hump. We're talking about a 21.5 win line here, so I see them as like a 23, 24 win team. Like I'm not expecting anything crazy here, I just think they have enough talent to get a few more wins. I like Shaden Sharp. I like Anthony Simons. Like I think they have some good, like a top 7, top 8 is pretty talented across the board. So I think they have a chance. I don't love it by any means, but I just think that's such a low number that I think they can clear that.
Marco?
Yeah, they're sneaky deep. Like, we saw a lot of Jabari Walker and Kamara and Duop Breath last year. Like, those are the back end of their rotation. They're solid players. They started a lot last year. Like, even if we don't see a lot of Robert Williams, I don't know. I just feel like they're too talented to be a 21-win team. Like, I agree. And you think about Portland, like, it's way up there. They play a lot of teams deep in road trips. Like, it's a tough place to play. They could sneak some home wins. I think they're too talented to be that bad. But that being said, they're how many of these West teams are they really going to be beating consistently? It's tough. I could see it being a tight over. And yeah, you hope Scoot improves. You hope that Sharp improves. Who knows what they do with Grant and even Amph. He's kind of been thrown in trade talks a lot. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of a believer in their talent, but their ceiling is probably like the 13 seed.
Yeah.
Also, they got Danny.
Yeah,
I know he's your guy, Justin, but they're making kind of maybe win now moves a little bit.
It's questionable.
I don't want to go
now.
that
He's still super young. He's 24, I believe. Maybe 23. Let me confirm. He is 23 years old still. Yeah, still super young. You guys made the point about the Grizzlies having these like trial periods for some of those deep guys. It's kind of the same
Right.
with the Blazers with like Delano Banton. You mentioned Duop Reith, like guys like that. They can kind of figure which one of those players are gonna be role pieces for them. And then I don't hate their starting five. Like Scoot Henderson will be a big like prove it year after how horrible he was last year. I really expect a resurgence from him. Anthony Simons provides a lot of scoring. Shaden Sharp hopefully is healthy this season. He really battled a lot of health issues last season. And then their big rotation is really solid now. And Ayton and Klingon, we'll see what we get out of Robert Williams this season. They got Jeremy Grant, who's like the best player in the room at this point. We'll see if they end up moving him. But I feel like even if they do, the number is just too low. Like the floor is too low for me to go under on it. I would feel wrong going under on 21.5 on most any team except the Brooklyn Nets, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's it.
We didn't talk about it, but today Gordon Hayward retired.
Oh, I didn't
You guys
actually hear that.
Sad day
See
for
the
all of
stat
us.
that Paul George is the only player left from the 2010 NBA draft class. How insane
Wow.
That is
is that?
insane.
You have LeBron James in the 2003 class
Yeah,
still going strong, and the 2010 class has one player left. Just incredible.
that is crazy. That's a cool stat too. Either of you guys, I know we're kind of bleeding into the time here, but Laugh, do you want to give a couple of your favorites here before we end the pod?
Yeah. So I think this might be relatively hot, but hot take. But I think Golden State being over 43.5 is one of my favorites. And I also am. I think I spoiled this one, but the Clippers under is one of my favorites as well, which I know you guys are in disagreement on. But yeah, it's just the beginning of the end for me.
Fair enough. Marco?
You said Warrior. What'd you say?
Warriors over and Clippers
Warriors,
under.
Clippers, Warriors. Okay. I'll say Mavericks under 50.5, and I'll say I like Warriors too, but I'll say something else. I'll go Kings over 46.5. I just believe in the Beam team.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Kings too, but you know what? I'm gonna be weird and I'm gonna say the Grizzlies under. I'm sure you knew I was gonna go that direction. You guys both are on the over there, but I'm gonna stick to my guns. I don't believe in them. I'll go Suns over, and then I'll just throw in the Jazz under as some fun ones there.
I think comparatively to the East, we're a lot more opposing on the favorites, so which is interesting.
It makes it fun, honestly.
Yeah.
We'll have to compare and contrast. We'll see who's right when the season ends. We'll have a recap episode. We'll be like, oh, Laugh went 15-0 in the West. Justin went 1-14. But yeah, any other comments before we wrap, guys?
No, I think we covered a lot. It seems like the
Yeah,
West
no, this was a
always
lot of
just
fun.
has like so much more depth than the East. Like
I know.
just every year, there's always like 7 teams that could get 50 wins, and the East it's always like 3 or 4.
Yeah, I've had a harder time like analyzing the West in the hot takes and in this episode than I did the East. I felt like the East is just more clear cut in terms of like who are the best teams, who are the worst teams. Like I've created this narrative where I feel like the Kings are going to be like a top 3 seed. I mean, we'll see if that actually comes to play, but it'll be fun to watch regardless.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, Laugh. Thanks for joining for the past 2. It's been fun having you. Okay, so we're going to wrap there. Thanks to everyone who's listened. This is us. We're another basketball podcast. You can follow us on the Twitter at Another B-Ball Pod. Our YouTube is Another Basketball Channel. Our Spotify is Another Basketball Podcast. I'm going to try to put in the Spotify notes the link to the YouTube channel. I haven't been doing that yet. And I'll do the opposite in the YouTube channel. So you can follow us on both. Please please subscribe. We're at 20 subscribers, trying to up that number, get closer to 50. And we have 6 5-star reviews on Spotify. I want to get that number to 10. That'd be fun. But yeah, so thanks so much for everyone for listening. Take care.